All right, so this will serve as part two, kind of where we left off on working on mini project one. Again, out here on the overall section, you'll see what we need to do for mini project one. We'll run through those last little pieces of that today. The video for this year is going to be up here at the top. So you'll have NumPy, SciPy, and the mini project starter one. You also, under the old videos, are going to see this project one and two. So if you're lost or you're struggling or you missed something in the videos, you're just not quite getting it, feel free to go back and watch last year's videos. Those should be able to help. I explain this process a little differently. Um, you'll notice that I'm purposely and unpurposely, however you want to put it, making mistakes in here so that you guys can see the process and the flow of how to correct and how to dig into this data. So, okay. So let's take a little look at the code that we left off here. The whole goal was that we needed to get a history of all the stock ticker information. And so if we just print out where we left off, in which case we set a Microsoft as one of our ticker, and then for each one of these, we're going to set a value called my ticker, and then YF being the Y finance. Remember, we have to import those in the proper way. And then we're going to pass that ticker in, MSFT, and then history is going to end up being our history. And we got to set a start date or an end date, or we may find that there's a better option that we could set for start and end date. And then once we get those values back, we're going to look for date in the close and then just print date for the time being. So if we look at this one in particular, right now, this one is just giving dates and it's saying, hey, we want date times in the future. If you see these, it just means it's a warning. You don't have to necessarily do anything in particular about that. But we do see the stock values for given dates. The problem is we don't know what dates that associates with, right? So we asked for 10 days worth, the 1st to the 10th, but notice we only got back 6 values that came in here. And again, part of that's going to be because of holidays, part of that's going to be because of trading days on the weekends, etc. So we want to make sure that we get 10 trading days total. So we need to do a little bit more lookup on this Y finance and find out if we can get something that will help get us a better period in there. So let's go back and look at the Y finance documentation. And I'll take you back here. Okay, and the home page, which will take us out to this documentation section, and then we can get a little bit more detailed in here. Okay. So what we're really looking for is history, right? And we kind of talked about that. And this little thing here is going to show you how to do multiple tickers, which is built into it. In our case, we don't want to necessarily utilize this because then we got to track a bunch of deep information. It's better if we just run the same thing for each one of the tickers we're interested in. But what we'll notice here is we have this option for period, and we're asking for the period of 1 month. There may be a way where we could specify those 10 days specifically that we want to pull out of there. So here we can see we set start and end dates. We might just want to use periods and see if we can use period of 10 days. So let's see if we can get to that other documentation here. I have to find it back in here. And this is part of it too, is finding out exactly how to get to the documentation. So let me see if I can find that real quick. So let's do this. Instead of start end, let's do period. And then on this period, let's see, 10. So hoping it would give me some information here. Let's do period. Doesn't look like it wants to. So let's try just 10 days. Let's see if that works. And that's probably going to be in quotes because we had the actual date period in there. Okay. And instead of closing this out for that, let's just print history for the time being to see what gets out of there. Okay. So again, we do get this back. We can see that we have multiple days, and it's just pulling the last 10 days. And in this case, it's going to pull the last 10 trading days, right? So we look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Notice that we are missing some of the dates in here, meaning that we started the 25th. We're missing 27, 28. And if we go look at the calendar, come on, give me calendar. There we go. And the 7 and the 8 in this case, or I'm sorry, 27, 28. There we go. That's the weekend, right? So this, by using period 10, is actually pulling the last 10 trading days. So this is what we're after. Now that we have that, we can see that we have this pandas data frame, and we don't know about those yet. What we're interested in is treating it just like a dictionary, but we need to figure out what these columns are, right? That goes across here, because we can see these dots, which means there's more information here. We need to figure out what those columns might be. So if we think of it as a dictionary, we could instead print out something like history.keys, right? And that should give us back all of the keys that are available to that object. So let's print that out. Aha. So this tells us all the different options that go across there. And the one we're most interested in is close, right? Because we want to grab the closing price of the last of 5 tickers. So we need to make sure everything we're centered around is pulling the close column. This also says this is an object, and we can also pull this other information. So we are specifically looking for history, close. And because this is a dictionary, each row is a different line of information as it goes down there. So if we print that one last time, history, close, let's see what pulls out there. Okay, and so we got the dates and we got the closing price for each one of those, all right? But we'll notice we end up with 2 columns of information. So we're still getting back a frame of some sort. What we want to do is store both of these pieces of information. We want the date and we also want to store the close. So if we just wanted the closing price, we could set like an empty dictionary saying closing list, something like that. Not a dictionary, but just the list itself. And then we could loop through that history. So for price in hist close. And I pressed the wrong button there. Give me a second. And that's history. We're going to append that to that, right? So we have an empty one. We're going to append out whatever that price is at this point. And then at the end, we have our closing list, and that gives us all of our values, which at the end, that's what we want to plot up on the screen. So let's see if this works. Oh, you know what? I didn't tell it to print here. So print close list. There we go. Stop that. Try that again. Great. So now we got a list of all those closing prices. But again, the only issue with that is when we go to graph that, and we can do that. So if we wanted to graph that for the time being, come down here, we would have something like our plt.plot. And that plot is going to be plot that closing list that we just got out of there. So closing list. Okay. And we want to plt.xlabel. And this will be days. So our x-axis is going to be the days. And our plt dot y label will be our y-axis, and that will be our closing price. Something like that. And then at the end there, you're going to need something like plt show to actually show the graph. So let's see what happens when we get just this one stock ticker of Microsoft and how it prints out. Okay. So we have the x-axis going across as 0 to 10, right? And the reason it goes up to 9 is because we have 10 values in here and it's using the index. Remember, that's why it's starting at 0. So it's using index 0, which is this price here, 404, 8965, etc. But we get this nice little graph of what's going on going through there. Okay. So what we want to do is actually get the dates to show up down at the bottom. That makes that a little bit easier on how we do that. So let's see how we can get more on the ticker side. Let's go in here. Let's look at our ticker. So if we look at our ticker file here, give me a second. There we go. Y Finance. And we want this ticker, which is the ticker.py. That'll give us some information about what comes in here. Aha, now I remember where it's at. Let's go back here. Here. Let's go back to finance. There we go. There's our history. And they removed the wiki. Where did they put that information? Oh, there we go. I see what they did. So they moved the wiki, and then over here on the right, they didn't put a blank page there, but they tell you all the information you need over here. So we want ticker. There we go. So these are all the informations of what we can do for parameters. So we looked at period, and it wants us to set the different periods. And that's how we got our 10 days, is we just set it up in these different ones. So these are just showing the values of what you can use. We have start end giving us information. As we scroll down, we can get timeout and returns that we come through there. We know that we want to pull out those extra headers. All right. And that was here where we had close. If we remember, there was one called date. So let's see if we can pull out date. And when we do date, we're looking specifically for creating some kind of tuple or something inside of here that would give us both our date and our price, right? So let's see for, let's say row in our history. Let's see here. Give me a second to see if I can pull this up here. And actually for this one, this is fine. Let's just leave that at price. Okay. So what we also want to do is see how we can make this look a little bit better. If we go back and look at our matplotlib section of that, let's look at matplotlib. Okay, and as we go out, we notice that we can format this in different ways. What we're really looking for is seeing how we can give some titling and stuff to it. So we can see here where we got categorical plotting, that's off the subtitle, which allows us to put a title at the top, and that allows us to make our graphs look a little bit better. So play around with what you see in Matplotlib, see if you can build out a nice looking paragraph. So like here, you can see just PLT title, and that will be the overall. So we could say something like our PLT dot title. Let's use an F string, and this is going to be something like our ticker, right? And that ticker being whatever ticker we're working on. And stock price data, something like that. And we want to put this for every one of these tickers. We're going to end up plotting that out. So let's print that real quick. Let's see if that gives us what we're looking for. Yeah. So now we have, notice how Microsoft automatically got put in there, right? Because as we're going through all of our tickers, we're looping through in order to put that out, and then we show at the end of that. So that works good. Let's go and look over here. Let's see if we can clean up that x-axis. So x-axis just starts at 0 and goes through. Let's see if we can set and define what days we want. So to look at that, let's just do a search for axes, and I bet we can find it. Let's do it down. Aha. So if you remember axes, this is the X. This lets us define what numbers are going to be going across. And remember, the way that's laid out is X-min, X-max, Y-min, Y-max. So let's just steal that, right? And that goes inside of that command. So before we do a show, let's do something like plt.axis. And we want to paste in this list of axes. And actually, that should be a tuple. So let's fix that. There we go. And so for X min, we obviously want days to start at 1, right? And we want our max for that to be at 10. Our Y max, you'll notice on our pricing here that we kind of have a little bit and it kind of hits the bottom. Maybe we want that to figure out where if we want to add a little bit of buffer, right? So that it doesn't just max out right down here at the bottom. So to do that, we have to do some looking at our prices, right? We got to figure out what is our lowest price and what's our highest price, etc. So what we could do is get the information back out of those pricing and set those days. So we have closing list, right? Let's copy that. So we could say low price equals closing list. And if you guys remember from Python, we got to use copy for that. So import copy. And then we're going to say low price equals copy.copy. And we're going to copy that list. If we don't do that, if we just say it's equal to it, then when we change thing in one list, it's going to change them in both. And we don't want to adjust the pricing. We want it to stay in the order because that's the definitive of the last 10 days. So now that we have a copy of that list called low price, you guys remember how to do some sorting. So low price sort, we'll sort it in the number. And then we know that whatever the low price is, that's the first one in the list, right? And the highest price is going to be the last one in the list. And we don't know how many is in there, although we should have 10 values, but we could say something like low price equals our low price list 0, because that's the first value. And we could do high price is equal to the low price -1, which gives us the last one in there. And remember, those are all sorted numerically in this little practice one. So what that allows us to do is get our Y maxes and Y mins, right? So now our Y min is going to be our low price. And then we could give it a little bit of a buffer. So we could say something like -2. And on our Y max, we could do this as high price. And we could say maybe +2, give us a little buffer around it. So let's print that. Let's see what that looks like. There we go. And so what that did was give us a little bit so it's not always cranking at the bottom. We got to set these values. You can also see that now our days go from 1 to 10 as opposed to 0 to 9, essentially. You still see that we have 9 values. It's just now it starts over here at the 1 and does the 404. So if we look at this one up here, we can see we start at the same value, 404 right in the middle. And over here, now it starts clear over to the left so that it's the first one that goes through. Okay. So that all looks good. You could sit here and play with this back and forth, and you should have a little bit of idea of what's going on. The other thing is, if you'll notice, we're just using closing price. So instead of stock price, let's say closing price. That makes a little more sense. And we could just say closing price like that. That looks good. So the only thing we have to do to test this is to add more stock tickers. So say we wanted to do something like Tesla, um, maybe we want to add Sony in there. Oh no, I'm just picking random stocks. And you can go ahead and hit play, and in theory, it should pop up a different graph for every single one of those. There we go. We got 3 graphs pop up. So we can see the different closing prices in those. We can see that the charts all make difference and they all have different values. And because of the way we wrote it, it's always giving us that little buffer at the bottom, no matter what we picked overall. Okay. Now, there's a couple of other ways. You'll notice in the video that I produced last year, I actually had you create a function to go gather this information. That's not a bad idea because you're going to be doing it over and over. This way also works. This way also assumes that we are providing a list of 5 stock tickers. So let's go ahead and throw some extra in here because the homework assignment says we need at least 5. Let's check out Facebook and Apple. Okay. All right. If we feed these in, now you could write this in a way where you are needing to enter in 5 stock tickers. Don't do that for this homework assignment. So if you watch last year's video, I had it in a way where you enter in 10 of those or 5 tickers from scratch from the command line. There's no reason to do that. Just set 5 of your favorite ones going through there so that we can test that and run it through. So let's go ahead and rerun this to make sure we get 5 graphs. Fantastic. So we got our 5 graphs. That all looks great. So let's go back here and look at our homework requirements. I'm going to close this just for the time being. All right, we need to use an API to collect the closing price of 5 of your favorite stock tickers for the last 10 trading days. That worked out well. Remember, we can double check that we have those. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great. Store this information in a list, and we need to convert that to an array in NumPy. So what we need to do is actually convert what we got out of that closing price, which is this closing list. We need to convert that over to a NumPy array. Do you guys remember how to do that? So from Monday, all we have to do is set this to, say, our closing, doesn't matter how we call it. Let's call it our NumPy my array, doesn't matter. And inside that num array, we do np.array. And that array, we just need to pass in this closing list that we get back out there. So closing list. Okay, that will convert it to an array. And then at that point, we can pass that into our plot. So within our plot, we say MSFT, or not MSFT, my array. There we go. And let's double check that that all works. It's going to work the same, only what it's going to do is be a little faster when it goes to execute the code. In this small demonstration, you're not going to notice it as much, but you'll notice that it does spit it out a lot faster. Okay. All right, so we got all our graphs. That's all working great. Let's close that out. Let's look at our requirements here again. Okay, plot these 5 graphs. Feel free to add as much information as you want. Just explore what's in there. At a minimum, it just needs to show 10 data points. Ours is doing that. Now we need to save those graphs in a folder called charts as PNG files. We don't want to actually upload those to the project folder, right? The project should save those at the point it executes. You may want to add this folder to your git ignore, right? So what that means is we're going to add a folder over here called charts. So new directory charts. Okay. And we do not want to have charts go into our Git repository. So what we're going to do is right click on charts, go down to Git, and we're going to say add to Git ignore and then Git ignore. And what that does is make sure that we never submit charts up to the GitHub repository, right? So what that means, if we don't actually submit the charts folder going up there, now you could have the folder go up. You just want to make sure that nothing inside of that actually gets submitted up. In this case, I would say just create the folder. So now, in order for this to work, we need to create the folder before we start. And then after that, we need to go through and add those files in there. So to create a folder, you guys will have to remember how to do that. If we come back out here and go to automate the boring stuff, which we did in the past, let's go here. And we go out to our section on organizing files. And that's how to copy files and folders, permanently delete them, safe delete, walk it tree. There we go. Let's see, let's go back up here. Save files. All right. I think it's chapter 9, not chapter 10. Let's try that. Let's see, down. There we go. Creating new folders. So we want to use the os.makeDirs function. And what that'll allow us to do is make that folder inside of our program. So what we want to do is to try this first, because if it already is created, then we don't want to create that charts folder, right? We already added it to the git ignore, so we can always assume that it's in there. We just have to make sure that the files we submit do not get turned in. No, fair enough. In our project, actually, we created it. So let's do this. So try, we need to import OS. So let's do that up here. Import OS. And then we can grab the example of how they do that. We just call os.makeDirs. Oops, not that way. Here, tab, and paste that in. And what this is going to do is we don't want to actually set the directory path. All we want to do is call it charts, right? And let's make sure that that follows the path. That's the other direction. Like that. And so what that will do is create the charts folder if it doesn't exist. If it already exists, then we can have an exception come up like that, that, there. Except, and the exception will just be continue. In this case, we don't even need to accept. So what it's going to do is try to create the folder if it doesn't exist. If it already exists, just keep moving on. Okay. This looks good. Oh, it doesn't even accept. All right. You can just say continue. Continue didn't work. All right, give me a second here. I'm forgetting this step. All right, let's try a different way. So you can do OS, right? But we can also use path. So let's do path. And that's actually in this documentation too here. So you're going to have path, which is here. So you can use path and then you can just do path.makeDir. That works too. So if we use path, which is a better way of doing it, path, that way we don't have to know whether or not we're on a Windows box or a Linux box, etc. We'll do path and charts. Charts will create that folder for us, and we will do that on a makeDir. Okay. Now on the exception, we want to catch on an exception that the file already exists. So file exists error. And if it already exists, then we're going to go ahead and pass, not continue. There we go. And path, you'll notice, is underlined in red, which means we need to import that. So let's import path. And then we're good. So the first part here is it's going to create this charts folder if it doesn't already exist. And then at that point, we're going to go ahead and go through our loop, which will take us through each one of these tickers that we have set and create this and then show this chart. What we need to do is go out to our map plot and we need to figure out how to save these graphs. So let's look at save and let's look further down. No, image tutorial. All right, that's looking at true images. We want to just save that. Let's go to examples up here. Okay. And on our examples, we want just a simple line chart would be just fine. Notice there's a lot of different graphs you can generate coming out of there. So let's see if we can save. That's not what we're looking for. Let's look at references, or better yet, there's a really good tutorial in here. So let's do this tutorial. F and then save. That's where I was just at. Give me a reference here. Let's see here. Where's my plot? There's PyPlot. Okay, so inside PyPlot, let's look at all the options that we have. We can get the figures, get our subplots, adding data to it. We're already good there. Spans, spectral bins. Aha, there we go. Save fig. So save fig is going to save the current figure, which is what we're at. In this, we need to save the file name, in which case we got to pass the file name that we want it to save as. And then we have other options that we could set this at. By default, it's always going to be a PNG file. So we just need to set that. Let's go over here to our program. And we'll do that after we show it to the end user, or actually even right before. It works great. So plt.save fig, and then we need to pass in the file name. So let's just put file name here for now. And that should do that. So we have to build file name. So for this file name, we need to build a string that will have that. We need it to go into the charts folder. And inside the charts folder, we want to call it by whatever the stock ticker name is. So let's call it ticker. And then we want to concatenate that to a PNG file. So what this does is it builds it into the charts folder. It then grabs the ticker name of whatever we put in. So whether that's Microsoft, Tesla, Sony, etc. And then we put a .png at the end. So it creates the file name. We save config, not save fit. There we go. And then we go ahead and show that config out. So let's try that, make sure our code works the way we would expect. And let's see, no module named path. Well, we shouldn't have path. Why is path not working? Embarrassingly, I'm probably, that's because it's in pathlib. There you go. The reason I'm going back to that documentation is that should be documentation you guys always have access to in the future too. So there we go. That looks better. Let's try this again. Okay, so we've got it printing out all of our information here. It's printing out our graphs. And if we look up here in the charts folder, we actually have these PNG files representative of those charts. If we double click, we can see what's actually pulled up there. That all looks great. Now, we don't want to print out this data. This was just for our debugging purposes. So let's go ahead and for now, just comment that code out so we can make sure it doesn't execute. This all looks good. If we run this again, it's going to overwrite those images, which should be fine. There we go. We can see the output. Great. And we have our images. Okay. So let's look at our other requirements here. Save these graphs in a folder called charts and as PNG files. Don't upload those. They need to be added to the git ignore, which we did. Notice how these are in a light gray. That means they're not going to be submitted up. Now, here's where I kind of messed up in the stuff I showed you guys here today. I never committed, and that's a bad thing. We need to make sure we have commits. So every little time something was working right, I should have been committing that overall. So let's go ahead and commit now. Commit. And in this case, we did way too much. So we added charts. And then we also created graphs along with adjustments for dates and high and low price. So like each one of those, I should have committed in there so I can make sure it worked. But let's go ahead and commit and push. And so to get your points here, just make sure you have a minimum of 5 commits. So just commit often. If you guys are going back watching the video, make sure you go back and commit often. And then I'll be checking out the master branch. I need to update this. This will say main branch. As a matter of fact, let me just do that now so we can make sure nobody gets confused. Edit, edit. This will be main branch. There we go. Okay, be sure to include the requirements.txt file, which contains all the packages that need to be installed. You'll need to create this file with the proper output of pip freeze. So we have created that. The problem is there's nothing in it, right? Because that was before we pip installed Y-Finance and before we installed everything else. So we need to go update that. And it's always best to do this after your project's up and running. Make it the last thing you do. So get all your code situated, make sure you got all those points, etc. Then come back in here and do your pip freeze greater than requirements. .txt and make sure that's all spelled correctly. Yes. And what that does is take the output of pip freeze, which is a list of all your packages and the very specific version of those, and then dumps that into your requirements.txt file. So you should have something like this. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and commit that real quick because we now have a updated requirements. So updated requirements.txt with final package list. And go ahead and commit and push that. Push. Okay, that all worked. The next part we need to do, let's go back to our main. And the last 20 points, which is a big chunk, is there should be a readme.md in your project that explains what your project is, how to install the pip requirements, and how to execute the program. Please use the GitHub flavor of Markdown. All right, so let's go look at our README. And right now we have very little, right? Just mini project 1, etc. If we come over here and look at this on the right, we can also see a preview of what that looks like. So right now we're going to go steal the template that I gave you guys. So if we go back out here and go to our GitHub mini projects and tricks, and here's your GitHub template. So we're going to steal this all the way down to the bottom. And all you have to do is dump that in here. Okay. Notice how it automatically kind of creates this walking template for you. That looks good. And let's see what we want to do here to make this look good. So we probably don't want to use main header titles because notice how that gives us some gaps and things here. Let's try 3. That should keep these closer together. Whoops. Yeah, that's better. So I'm going to tweak our template to make sure we do 3. And that's why I mentioned that this template will kind of get modified as we go. So let's do 3 of these. Okay. All right, so make sure you guys put your name in the middle here. You have mini project 1. That looks great. Now we need to set our project title. So this is just going to be mini project 1. That looks good. And an explanation of what we're trying to do here. Well, we can come back out here. Let's go ahead and just save this for now. And go back to our assignment. And I kind of give you an idea. This project will use packages of NumPy and Matplot in order to create that out. So let's steal this as a getting started part. There you go. And this project will be using the packages of NumPy and Matplot in order to create 5 graphs that output as PNGs. Well, we need a little more data than that, right? Because this does a little bit more than that. So ultimately, this project will utilize finance, if I can spell here today, to gather the last 10 trading days of 5 stocks. It will put this information into a NumPy array and then use matplotlib. And you can just take that last part. That works great. So, and matplot, find my section here. There we go. In order to create 5 graphs. Then output as PNG files in the charts. Let's put that in quotes so people know that that's a quote. Folder. Okay. So you can tweak this. You can name this however you want. I encourage you to be a little descriptive in here. It's good practice. And when you get out to your big projects and stuff like that, I'm going to grade these parts pretty heavily. Remember that this project or this README is actually worth 20 points. So it's a very big chunk of the actual program, that being worth 100 points for your mini project. So over descriptive is a good thing. On the getting started section, we don't have any dependencies or anything we need to do here. What we really want is pip instructions. So we're going to say install requirements with pip. And then down here, we want to add a line of code that actually gives us that, right? So we can steal this because this is what we use for code. And here we're going to say pip install -r, and that says this is a requirements file, so requirements.txt, and that will install all the packages we need. Don't list out pip install white finance, matplotlib, all of that. That's the whole purpose of us building this requirements.txt file, because there's lots of dependencies. We also want to make sure that we're installing this very specific version of these, because that's what worked at the time we executed our code. If we told them to go ahead and install this on their own time, well, maybe Panda's got an update, or in this case, Y Finance, etc. And this has happened during class, that these packages changed and broke everything. And in this case, it was matplotlib. Between Monday, when we taught this and told everybody to pip install matplotlib, and then we saved it in a requirements file, by the time they submitted it on Wednesday, the matplotlib came out with a new version and it completely broke our code. So it's very important to use a requirements file that specifies the exact version that you want to install. All right. So we have pip install requirements. And then at this point, we need to tell them how to execute our program. We don't need to do any kind of install. So let's go ahead and get rid of that section. So we have getting started, install requirements with pip. There we go. Executing the program. And so to run this program, I obviously have been using this play button at the top. However, if you are using this from a main line, you would say something like Python and then main.py will actually execute that file. If you want, you could print out some extra information here. So like you could say gathering information on et cetera, et cetera. When you run it this way, notice how it actually pops up in an external window, right? So this is kind of handy. You can close this up. I have to actually hit X, then it will generate another one on my computer, X, etc. And it actually gives you the option in these files to hit save figure, and then it would go ahead and save it out. We're already doing that. So let's make sure, let these pop up. They're popping up on another screen here, so just ignore that. There we go. And so that is what we want in there. So in this code for command on executing, we say Python main.py, and then we'll go ahead and run it. On the help side of things, we probably don't need any kind of help section here. So let's get rid of that. And on the authors, this is where you should have it, right? So make sure that you put your name in here. If you want, if you had somebody else work with you, etc., you would put that information on this side. Version history, because this is always just going to be the initial release when you're actually releasing it. So something like that. License, you guys can determine what license you actually want to set this at. I'm not worried about that. Acknowledgements, if you are using, like in this project, we're fine, right? In your final projects and such like that, if you're using code from the internet that helped you get things up and going, then you want to make sure you acknowledge that here. So in this case, for our acknowledgements, if we wanted to, just for good practice, we would want to acknowledge automate the boring stuff because that helped us with the path. So let's go out to chapter 9. And so what you do is you put that in this second part. And in this first part, that's what's going to show up over here. And we're going to say automate the boring stuff.com. And you can see how that updated over here on the right-hand side. So we had that one. We had the matplotlib save config. This was a good one. As a matter of fact, we're going to back up one because we told them we just use matplotlib, which is pyplot. Here we go. Matplotlib. Paste this into here. Great. Let's see, what else do we have? That's probably enough for this point. It's just to give a demonstration. Another thing you could do is if you needed to go find stock tickers and such like that. So I gave you those because I have all those memorized. But you could always come out here and do a Google search and find your favorite one and then submit those up to your file, right? So if we come back up here and look at our main.py, these are where I have my stock tickers. You guys can go Google search the stock tickers for the ones that you're interested in. If you were using a stock ticker broker or graphs or something like that, and you want to give acknowledgments to that, you can certainly do that down there as well. Okay. This finally looks like we got a final project here. So let's go ahead and commit this, and we can say updated readme to the proper template. And then let's go ahead and commit push that. And then push. There it goes. So let's go out now and make sure that everything's updated on GitHub. There's our mini project 1. Oh, that's the old one. Let's go back here. There we go. So we can see that it put this information up here at the top. We have our mini project 1 as our project, simple overview and purpose, and description. So we need to fix this yet. I need to get that out of there. Let's go to, we don't need this section. We're just going to use the subheader description and kind of keep it going from there. So save, git, commit, push. Let's refresh this. It's not quite pushing yet. There it is. Okay, so we've got our header set up using the right size, right? So this is header 1 size, header 2, Anything below mini project 1 should have header 2s, and then header 3s are another size underneath. Notice this also gives us our nice line for this block and section. So we have our requirements, we have our install instructions, how to execute the program, our authors of how it goes through, and version history, and our links going out. All right, this is starting to look like a real project. So the things I'm going to be grading you on, obviously I have 7 commits here, so I'm now past the 5 commits. Make sure you guys are committing often. I say a minimum of 5. You should have quite a few of those as you go through. The more commits you do, the easier it is for you to roll back when you guys have problems and issues, right? One thing we always want to make sure in this one is that we did not submit the charts folder. So notice there is no charts folder here on the project. If we go out and look at our project, it's there, but we need to create that from scratch. So one thing I always tell people to do is once you get it up here, you think you're good to go. What I would do is go out to your code, go ahead and copy this, and you can come out to here. Let's close your working project. Go to get from VCS, paste in your code. You can't use this same name because you're already using that. So change this to something like mini project 1 test, not text, and hit clone. And this will do a checkout of your code, which is what will happen when I do it, right? So when I go to grade you, this is what you'll see pop up. We'll want to make sure there is no charts folder or anything like that this is good. It's going to say, do you want to create a virtual environment? We do. So let's go ahead and do that. I've noticed in PyCharm, when I hit OK here, sometimes this will work, sometimes it doesn't. All right. Particularly for the pip requirements, it's going to try to not only create the interpreter, but automatically execute your pip requirements so that you don't actually have to do that. Not everybody's using PyCharm, so always assume that you need to install the latest requirements. A lot of times you will get an error that pops up here, so let's see if it does it. There we go. So it failed to install the packages. Let's go ahead and hit cancel. And it gave us an interpreter, right? I got the right interpreter name, but I need to go install those. So following your instructions, I come in here and I pip install -r requirements. If I don't do that right away, right? I just want to show you this as a demo. I go to your main.py and I hit run. It's going to say no modules, right? And I'm going to see a nice little line up here at the top that says, hey, you're missing all these packages that are required. I can click install requirements here, but let's follow your guys' instructions. So pip install -r requirements. And what's better is instead of typing this out, come over here to your README and copy and paste this out. That's the purpose of it. See the little copy icon? I hit copy, paste, and run it. If it doesn't run, you probably have a typo. So that's the reason I say do it this way. It will double check to make sure that your README file is correct and you don't have some weird typo inside of here. If that all works, then we should be able to go to this copy and make sure it works correctly. And then you can paste that into the terminal. So in other words, go ahead and submit everything up to GitHub before you turn in your final project. Make sure you check it out yourself as if you're a new user. You will need to change the project folder name because it's going to match what you already have, and then test it and make sure it's going to perform like you would expect it to. A lot of times students, it works great on theirs, doesn't work on mine. It's because they didn't have the charts folder and they forgot to add the code to automatically create the charts folder, etc. So always test it as if you're a brand new user. As you can see, this is going to take a while to install these packages, this and that. So when it comes to grading, it takes me a little bit of time to grade because I have to recheck out these packages regardless if every user uses the same packages, because I'm always creating a new interpreter on the system or a new and virtual environment. So it takes a little bit of time to get through here. You always want to do it with fast internet. All right. While this is doing that part, Ethan, Jan, you guys got any questions?
No questions.
Okay, great. Hopefully that should pretty much get you through the first homework assignment without any real troubles. So this week you will have the mini project, and if you just follow the videos, as you can see here, you should get all the points, right? As long as you follow along, get your graphs and everything in there, you should be good. The last piece of this is making sure you go do the quiz, right? So there is a quiz 1 out here. Make sure you go do quiz 1. It's open book, open note. Um, it shouldn't take you much to get through that one. All right. Okay, that's all installed. We can actually go out to main, and we should be able to actually run that file now. Oh, it's still indexing all those. That's it. If there's no questions, again, all you do is come up here to mini project, go out here to your folder, take this out of the URL, copy, come out here, create submission. Create submission. There we go. And just paste that URL in here. Hit submit, and you're good to go. All right.